Podcasting is more than just talking, it's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast, this week featuring Ralph Heath. He's a brand leadership specialist, a triathlete, and a best-selling author. Wrote the book Celebrating Failure, The Power of Taking Risks, Making Mistakes, and Thinking Big. Ralph, thanks for being with me today. I appreciate it. How did you go from being, a brand specialist, a brand leadership specialist, to a guy that celebrates failure?
Well, I owned an advertising agency for most of my career, and we kept having failures, multiple failures over and over again. But the odd thing that I noticed was that every time we failed, great things happened shortly thereafter. We learned some lesson, we improved. So it turned out to be the mark of success, really, every time we had a failure. And every time we ran into periods of relative calm with no mistakes, business usually ended up in some kind of downturn because we just weren't out there trying new stuff or taking risks.
It's funny because as a parent, a lot of times we tell our kids not to take risks, but as they get older, we kind of try to push them out there to be on their own and to do things like that and to take risks. As a business owner, was that a difficult thing for you to kind of show your team that they were able to do?
It was something that you had to work at constantly. And it's a difficult thing to stand up in front of 50 or 60 people and say, hey, it's okay if you make a mistake. It's okay if you are trying something great and you screw up, because everyone defines something great differently. So you're kind of doing a tightrope encouraging that kind of behavior. But I think you just have to do it, and you have to reward the successes. I think the other thing you can do to work at it is when you see someone within your company attempt something great and fail at it, and then use them as a positive example of the direction you want to go.
Ralph Heath, when you're putting together your book, Celebrating Failure, was it hard to come up with different failures that you've had that have turned into successes?
No, and mainly I recorded them as they were happening. So they became kind of a diary of events that occurred at the agency. For example, I remember when Mac computers first came out, we had computer publishing, but it was very slow. In order to move the cursor, you had to put in the longitude and latitude, type it in, and then the cursor would move to that, and then you would click it. But it was all done with keystrokes. I mean, it was just horribly laborious. We discovered desktop publishing quite by accident when we noticed that we were losing out on a lot of presentations because people were, for example, one of the areas we specialized in were catalogs. So other companies were starting to quote prices much lower than ours because they had all switched to the new form of publishing. So that was a lesson, that we were slow to come on board. And then when we discovered the Mac world, I always tried to let the employees make the decisions whenever possible. So we brought some of the computers in and said, try them out, give them a shot and see if you like them. Well, I thought it would be, within minutes that people would be raving to buy more, and I was fully prepared to make the investment to buy more. But people are so resistant to change that they hesitated to adopt the new technology. So then you have to, point them in that direction until such time that they embrace it. But just all kinds of learning experiences like that were enlightening.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned in your book was the cost of the computers. Was it $20,000 or $40,000 a computer? And just talking about having to put the longitude and latitude in to make the mouse move. I couldn't imagine that. We have such fast technology now in our pockets with our phones. I couldn't imagine having to go through and type out a y-axis and an x-axis in order to get the cursor to go where you wanted to. Where now we can just kind of drag our finger and plop.
Yeah. And for a non-technical person, that was even inconceivable, to me back then, thinking, geez, how do these people do it?
Right.
It took a real disciplined, uh, left brain kind of person that liked that kind of technical skill to embrace it. Whereas now it still attracts that crowd, but they're more open probably.
What do you attribute your success as a business person to, Ralph?
I think a passion really to always do more. Um, it's like when you're going after you're in a shootout for a $2 million a year piece of business, and you figure mentally if you retain that piece of business for 5 to 10 years, all of a sudden it's a $10 to $20 million pitch that you're involved in, and you can do a lot of things creatively and strategically to convince them to go with your company. And I just think we created an atmosphere where we would do anything. We would go the extra mile. We would have more rehearsals. We would stay up probably later at night, continuing to develop strategies that demonstrated how we think in order to get the business. And that was really the key to success, was that you had to continually recruit new clients.
Is it all about doing what it takes or everything that it takes in order to get to close a deal?
I think it takes not only to close the deal, but even ongoing. It's like if you have a client, you need to. I think part of the reason we were successful is I was blessed early on in advertising with some extremely demanding clients who, if they saw some new innovation and I hadn't brought it to them, you could feel them look at you kind of with a strange look, like, why didn't you bring this to us? So we always had to be on top of our toes, always looking out for what's the latest, the greatest. How can we bring our customers more customers for them? How can we help them work more effectively? So that just carried on as years passed, to the point that became the modus operandi. It's like, what great things can we continue to do? And I think it also, we did not fit well with clients who wanted mediocre service, or wanted things done quickly on the cheap. Uh, it, I mean, I appreciate that there's people making a living delivering that kind of service, but it wasn't what we wanted to do. We wanted to work with people who wanted the very best and the greatest, and were willing to pay for it, and wanted it executed. So it all created an environment that worked.
So doing things for some of the bigger clients that you had, competing against Chicago, New York, Minneapolis, San Francisco. How was a small town ad agency able to get the people that were able to make those types of things work for you and then for the clients?
Yeah, I think we used it to our advantage. There's that old saying that you're an expert 50 miles outside of your hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And we all, unfortunately, I don't think this is a great trait, but we all kind of look oftentimes at local things and go, oh, well, that's a lacrosse-based agency. What could they possibly know, compared to Chicago or New York or Minneapolis? Well, we kind of turned that around and positioned ourselves as niche players in a direct marketing world. And this was our main discipline. And we were from this small town that developed this strategy, and it just worked. They thought that was great compared to what they got in their hometown.
Right. Well, I know that you've got a background in radio. You've done, as you talked about, direct mail pieces with catalogs and stuff. advertising now has changed. I honestly believe that, with the advent of VCRs and now DVRs, people record their television, they fast forward through commercials. With radio, you've got internet radio, you've got satellite radio, you've got all that. With the mail pieces, you've got emails and pop-up ads on Facebook and other types of internet types of advertising. How would you have combated some of these things in today's world compared to when Ovation was in business?
The internet kind of came halfway through our time, but I think some of the mediums have changed, and the delivery systems are much more efficient and much more targeted. The message and the copy and the romance of the visuals, I really think that's the same. I mean, I'm amazed sometimes at some of the material I receive for marketing that will fail to give such basic information. They in with the copy, like, I don't know, they forget sometimes the city or the phone number or all kinds of things, or they don't spell out the benefits of the product in a way that appeals to the customer so they can see it immediately. And no matter what vehicle you're using, it's important that the basic message be the same.
So they forget the basics, more or less?
Yeah, I think so. They forget that people are interested in the benefit to the ad. They look at something and they go, why would I like this? So you've got to set up the benefit of why you would want to buy this product or service. And you have to do that up front. And now you can put that message right into somebody's email box or text who's shown a propensity to like that kind of product. Whereas 20 years ago, you were buying lists or whatever from companies that were similar, but maybe not. The targeting has just gotten much better, but the message that you deliver to them still has to resonate with a big customer benefit.
What about getting somebody to open up that piece of email, Ralph? Because that's always the difficult thing to do. I know that, and you opened up my email probably because we've got a history together. But if it would have been, hey, would you like to do a podcast with me? Would that have garnered an open? Would you have opened it if it came from somebody you didn't know?
Yeah. Well, again, it goes back to the benefit. So I've had a lot of times manufacturers will focus on the features of their product, right? Because that's what they deal in. If they're making down comforters, they scour the world finding the finest white down and the finest cotton to put the down in or whatever. So when they're directing you to create ads, their headline is white down comforter or something, which to the consumer, he's not impressed with that, or she's not impressed with that. But if you say down that will keep you warm naturally for a better night's sleep, then you've got a benefit that makes sense, and you're more apt to open it, the email or whatever it is. And it's just, again, it's keeping those benefits, customer benefits, in front of the customer rather than features.
Is it about the storytelling, Ralph?
Well, yeah, I think whenever you can romance it, again, continuing with the down comforter explanation, that's always easy for me. But if you create a company that has a heritage of European ways to keep the heat low at night and to sleep in natural down, that's a byproduct of the food industry, and these Europeans migrated to America and they settled in Wisconsin, and now they make these these down comforters by hand, that's a great story, as opposed to Macy's that, just bought them from somebody and puts them on the rack. There's no story there. And I think that's partly why so many department stores are going under. But there's a mass of products right now that are just regular socks, or what's the other one? Shavers, that somebody has put a story behind, and they're telling a story about how they make a better sock, and people love that kind of thing, as opposed to a company that has no story or no heritage behind it.
So it's all about buying the backstory to sell the front end, basically.
Yeah, I think it elevates the opportunity to sell. Then when you combine that kind of storytelling with some great benefits to the product, about why it performs better, why you get a closer shave, it adds to that decision to buy.
Well, it's kind of like the first chapter of your book, Starting Fires. So let's talk a little bit about that, about the fact that, that was the fire that you started when you were a kid, perpetuated into a lifelong of, starting those fires and admitting mistakes and doing things, maybe taking the wrong way to get there, but getting it done in the end.
For whatever reason, I've been in a reflective mood lately, thinking back on some of those monumental failures I had, and they were just incredible life lessons. Like one time, I was voted the captain of the swim team, and the swim coach was not my biggest fan, and he essentially turned the election around the next day and said, "Oh, there was some discrepancies in the vote. We're going to do it again." But anyway, I essentially got fired. And for a little kid who ran home and told his parents that he was captain of the swim team, and then came the next day to learn that he's not, you have to bounce back from that kind of defeat. And so, years later, when you get fired from a income producing client, you gotta bounce back, and those early life experiences just help you deal with that.
The book is called Celebrating Failure, and we've talked about some of the failures that have turned into a positive for you, but I'm guessing you probably had some failure that you had to deal with that wasn't that didn't turn into a positive.
Yeah, I can give you some examples of that too. One that still eats at me a little bit is in the beginning of the internet. We had a really creative group of technical people. Being in La Crosse, it was expensive for us to travel and get in front of clients in a city further away. So our guys put together what is essentially GoToMeeting or webinar or whatever. They figured out a way to put software together that we could broadcast to these companies and meet face to face and give our message. It all sounds simple now, but when they did it, it had never been done before. When we were doing it, we had some companies call us up to see if they could buy the technology. Somehow I had been so focused on the importance of sticking to what you do best that I missed it. It was like, no, we're an ad agency. We're not in the software business. I think it was probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done. But there.
I'm sorry to laugh.
Yeah, really.
I couldn't imagine being at the forefront of that, Ralph, and having that at your doorstep. And then, no, I don't want to do
yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. And I think there are numerous ones like that. I mean, we were kind of at the forefront of the internet, and there are all kinds. I mean, when you look around, there are a million innovations on the internet, and I never came up with any of them. So those were failures that remain. Other than I'd like to think I'm smarter now, but I missed it when it was happening.
Well, sometimes those opportunities can stare you right in the face, and if you don't jump, somebody else is going to jump on it and take it over you.
Right.
and
Yeah.
wrestle it from you. One of the things that you say, one of your chapter insights, you have what rhymes with my last name. It says basically Schmidt happens. Explain that.
Well, I just think you have to be able to roll with it when mistakes happen or failure happens or whatever. Um, I over the years we made some monumental errors with mistakes in catalogs, and you would print like 500,000 of them, and they might have had the wrong phone number or something like that. And so you had to kind of step up to the plate and make good. You had to reprint it or do whatever it took to make it right in front of your customer. So those were kind of tough.
Is the way that you deal with failure, the way that you deal with the outcome of failure, does that kind of show the person that you are, Ralph?
I think so. There are people who have been so beaten up, and I think continue to be beat up in their lives. Like you'll ask somebody a question or something, or even a simple thing like a price quote, like how much, or a time question. If you're working with, say, somebody who charges by the hour, and you ask, well, how many hours will that take for you to do that? So I know what it will cost. And they will go through incredible gyrations, explaining why it would take this amount of time. And if you're lucky, at the end of this 2-minute explanation, they might provide you with the numerical number that you asked for in the question. But they're just so afraid of making a mistake and quoting the wrong number, or you holding them to the wrong number, that they don't want to make an estimate. That kind of thing. I feel sorry for people who don't have the self-confidence to say, I think it'll take 10 hours, but I've made a lot of mistakes in the past, and it might be 20, but that's my best guess with the knowledge I have right now. And I wish there were more of that kind of thinking going on in the world.
Do you think that we're all just too afraid of failure and afraid of,
Yeah.
looking like an idiot?
Yes. Yeah, we're afraid we're going to get yelled at. We're afraid we're going to get fired. We're afraid people are going to ridicule us. And I've always come to admire the person who's willing to stand up and take their best shot and say, here's what I think it will take, rather than, be timid about what needs to be done.
Should we be afraid of failure?
I don't think so. Whenever I was failing, it was indications that we were headed down the right path, because we were out there trying new things, attempting something that hadn't probably been attempted before. And when you do that, you're going to fail. But the payoff, once you get there, is huge. And normally, when you fail, if you analyze it, you'll see that, if I just change this or that, then it'll probably work. And so you change this or that, and then you're successful.
Ralph Heath is the author of the book Celebrating Failure. And you retired from Ovation a few years ago. How have you changed, Ralph, since you've retired?
I don't really think I have. I I think I'm still impatient, pretty extreme, pretty opinionated. I have grandchildren. I have 2 grandchildren now, which I really enjoy. But I find I do have a lot more patience with them than I have with my own children, and I love that aspect of it. And some days I wish I could turn the clock back and be more generous with my time with my own kids as I am with my grandchildren now. But I don't know. I think it's a DNA thing. I think we're all at a younger age. When you have kids, you gotta go to work and you gotta provide a living and shelter. And there's something in our DNA that kind of drives us to keep doing that. And now I don't need to do that, and so I'm way more laid back, at least with the grandkids. Not so much in the business or volunteer work I do.
Okay. Uh, the book is called, as I mentioned, Celebrating Failure. Was that the first choice of the name of the book?
Oh gosh, no. We I could tell you stories. After I got done writing the book, I found an agent, and then he found a publisher. And I had been playing with the title Celebrating Failure, and the publisher said it doesn't pass the subway test. What's the subway test? We don't have subways in La Crosse. And he explained that no one would want to be caught reading a book about failure on a subway, which generally, a lot of times when somebody tells me I can't go in a direction, I often want to go in that direction. But my counter was, this book appeals to people who are not afraid of failure, who understand that it needs to be part of the process and success. So we argued back and forth, and I think at one time he convinced me to call it something else, and then all of my talking had convinced him to call it Celebrating Failure. So we went with it. But no, we looked at a lot of different titles before landing on that.
Do you have another book in you?
Well, I I think so. I've actually got one about half written.
Another business book, Ralph?
Well, I was trying to take more of the principles of listening and the importance of listening, and certainly it would be important for business, but I also think it would be important for relationships. So I'm hoping that it has a wider potential audience, but the importance of hearing what we're saying to each other.
You know, it's so funny you'd say that because I spent 25 years as a talk radio host, and my job wasn't all talking. My job was mostly listening. Throw a question out, listen to the answer, then expound upon the answer and ask a follow-up question based on what you said. So I totally, when you do this book, I'd love to review it for you.
I would like that. And I can tell in the 30 minutes we've been talking that you do that. I know, I just have this hunch that as soon as I say something, I know you're going to come back with a related question. So you've exposed yourself to me as an extremely good listener. And I guess because I'm writing this book, I'm attuned to that kind of thing. And I watch a lot of people who aren't listening and recognize that trait too. But it's important. It's hard to solve the world's problems if you don't hear what they are.
Yeah. Or if you don't see them, or if you don't act on, what you want to do in order to do that. What 3 things could somebody take out of the book, Celebrating Failure?
Oh, well, obviously the big one is that it's important that failure is a process on the road to success. I think they could take out of the book that it's okay to fail, that it's something you should embrace and welcome and not feel horrible about doing, because if you tell yourself that this is going to be an incredible learning experience, it's all good. And I guess the third thing is there is a lot in there about the importance of compassion and listening to people and trying to do good things for them, be it service for your company or just being kinder.
What one piece of advice would you give to a startup entrepreneur or somebody new to business?
Do it. I think that's the big roadblock, and being a farmer or being an entrepreneur. I haven't started anything recently, but I do get a lot of people that come to me and ask me, what do you think about this idea or that idea or whatever? And it's generally, yeah, it sounds like it could work. Or it doesn't sound like it would work, but I'm not always right. And it's hard to hard to know if something will work until you try it. And if it doesn't take a lot of capital to try the idea, try it on a small scale and see if you can discern if there's something out there that would make it get bigger. And then you just got to do it.
How do you scale that idea? Because I've got a lot of great ideas. I just need to learn how to scale from small to let's make some money.
Yeah. Of the businesses that I started, they've all been more brain intensive than product or material intensive. So I've never put really hardly any amount of money into anything that I've ever started. And it's mainly by starting small and seeing if there's a demand for it. And if there's a demand for it, just keep raising the ante and try and make it work on the cash flow that you've generated by starting small. And certainly there will be times when capital from outside might be necessary, but I think too many people fall into the trap of thinking, well, I've got this idea, but boy, I'll need a ton of capital. And that can be true in a lot of cases, but in other cases, it's not as true, especially if you can demonstrate on a smaller scale that you have something that would work. And then if you need investment, you can find it much easier.
Celebrating failure, the power of taking risks, making mistakes, and thinking big. Author Ralph Heath, thank you for joining us. How do we find your book?
Amazon.com, or just put it into the web. It's still out there. It's still selling after almost 10 years. It's in 5 languages now. So things are good.
I think I picked up one of your first copies because we were doing improv together, and you wrote to Bob, keep trying, great improvisational stuff, and failing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another class I think that is great for that whole mentality of failure. Man, you are putting yourself out there in front of people you don't know, trying to think on your feet. It's great practice.
The BSing with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com.
This has been another podcastforhire.com production.